My name is Thomas Hale. I am 65 years old, and to this day I can still remember the exact moment I realized my only son, Leonard, wanted me gone from this world. It was not a dramatic scene, not a fight, not even a confession. It was a half-open door, a forgotten bottle of heart medication, and a single sentence spoken with a calmness that chilled my bones. But before that moment, before the truth revealed itself like a knife sliding out of a sheath, I believed, foolishly, that my son still loved me. 3 days earlier, my life felt painfully ordinary. I spent the morning trimming the hedge outside my house, the same hedge I had cared for since my wife passed. The air was cool, the sky soft and pale, and I thought the day would end the same way it began, quietly and without surprises. Then I heard a car pull up. Leonard stepped out, smiling brighter than I had seen in years, holding a glossy envelope as gold as the sun itself. Something about the way he walked toward me felt theatrical, rehearsed almost, but I pushed that thought aside. A father's heart tries to believe the best in his child, even when the truth stands in plain sight. "Dad," he said, pulling me into a hug that felt strangely exaggerated. "I brought you something special, something you deserve after everything you've done for me." He placed the envelope in my hands as if it held a sacred treasure, and for a moment, I allowed myself to be moved by the gesture. Inside were first-class cruise tickets, 7 days on a luxury ship drifting through turquoise water. It was the kind of trip I used to dream about, but always postponed. Life had always required sacrifice, and I never thought indulgence belonged to men like me. I looked up at Leonard, my eyes warm with gratitude. "Son, this must have cost more than you can afford. Why now?" He laughed softly, glancing briefly at the ground. "Dad, please. You have spent your whole life working, worrying, caring for everyone else. Brianna and I just want you to finally breathe. Relax. Enjoy something beautiful for once." His words were perfect. Too perfect. They sounded as if he'd practiced them in the mirror the night before. Yet I swallowed the doubt. I was a father. Hope was my greatest weakness. I nodded, pretending to feel only joy. He continued, "You leave the day after tomorrow. Everything is arranged. Brianna handled the details." That evening, I placed the tickets carefully on my nightstand and began packing a small suitcase. I laid out shirts I had saved for special occasions, a jacket I hadn't worn since my wife's memorial, a pair of shoes still wrapped in tissue. But as I folded the clothes, I felt a faint unease tug at my thoughts. Leonard had been distant lately, missing dinners, skipping calls, offering empty explanations about being busy. Brianna had never been fond of me. Her eyes always seemed to hover somewhere above my shoulder when she spoke, as if acknowledging me directly required too much effort. Still, I convinced myself it didn't matter. Families drift, but love remains, or so I believed. By the night before the trip, the unease had grown, a quiet voice whispering from the back of my mind. Yet I silenced it. I told myself I was being paranoid. That age was making me oversensitive. I went to sleep repeating Leonard's words like a prayer. "You deserve this. Dad, relax. Dad, breathe." When morning came, I dressed neatly, made a light breakfast, and took a taxi to the port. Halfway through the ride, I reached into my jacket pocket to retrieve my medication and felt nothing. The bottle was still in the bathroom cabinet. A small, harmless mistake. or so I thought. The driver offered to turn around, and I agreed, irritated at myself for forgetting something so important. I stepped quietly into my house, intending only to grab the pills and leave again. But as I approached the living room, I froze. Leonard's voice drifted through the half-open door. "Don't worry, it's a one-way ticket. Once he's out at sea, it will look like an accident. No one questions when an old man falls overboard." My body turned to stone. I gripped the doorframe to keep myself upright. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer inside my chest. My own son, planning my death as if he were discussing a business deal. His tone was steady, unshaken, almost bored. "That insurance is enough to clear everything," he continued. "Once I get the house too, we're fine. Just 1 week, that's all." I stepped back slowly, silently, like a hunted animal slipping into the shadows. The air was thick, poisonous. My mind raced, but my face remained calm as I left the house again. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. If Leonard wanted to play this game, I would play it better, and he would regret ever thinking his father was a helpless old man. I walked out of the house as if nothing had happened, closing the door as softly as a whisper. The morning sun shone on my face, but all I felt was an icy hollowness spreading through my chest. I stood on the steps, pretending to look for the taxi I had just left, pretending to be the same father who still believed his son cared about him. Inside, Leonard kept talking, pacing the living room with the casual confidence of a man certain his plan would unfold perfectly. I forced myself not to look back, not to break the illusion that I had heard nothing. My hands trembled as I walked down the driveway. When the taxi circled back to pick me up, I gave the driver a gentle smile, the kind reserved for strangers who should not see the storm unraveling beneath the surface. "Everything all right, sir?" he asked. "Yes," I lied. "Just forgot something. We can go now." As the car pulled away, I stared out the window, the streets blurring into an indistinct ribbon of color. Thoughts tore through me like jagged glass. Every memory of Leonard as a boy surfaced, colliding with the reality of the man he had become. I remembered holding him at age 5, when he woke up from nightmares about losing me. I remembered sitting through school plays, clapping louder than anyone else. I remembered the way he cried at his mother's funeral, clutching my hand so tightly I feared his fingers would break. That boy and the man plotting my death could not be the same. But they were. The betrayal dug deep, deeper than any wound I had carried in my lifetime. As the taxi navigated through familiar streets, another thought rose, painful and unwanted. Had the signs always been there? Had I simply refused to see them? The truth was undeniable. Leonard had been drifting for months. His visits had become rare, each excuse less convincing than the last. He would drop by only when he needed something: money, help, advice he never followed. Brianna had grown even more distant, barely disguising her impatience whenever I entered the room. She treated me like a burden, an inconvenience her husband should have cut ties with years ago. I thought back to the time 6 months earlier when I visited unexpectedly. Leonard had been pacing the kitchen with his phone pressed tightly to his ear, arguing about money. He hung up the instant he saw me, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Just something at work," he had said. "Nothing serious." But the tightness in his shoulders, the way he avoided looking at me, told a different story. Then there was Brianna's comment to a friend on the phone, a comment she had made when she thought I wasn't within earshot. If he lived farther away, we'd finally have space. Leonard's dad is always around. It's suffocating. When I confronted Leonard about it later, he brushed it off with an easy laugh. You misunderstood. She didn't mean it like that. You know how women talk. But I did know. And deep down I had understood exactly what she meant. I had chosen to ignore all of it. Because I was a father. Because I loved my son. Because I didn't want to believe that the boy I raised alone after losing my wife could ever resent me, let alone want me dead. As the taxi approached the port, I clenched my hands tightly in my lap. The cruise ship rose like a floating city, brilliant and magnificent, buzzing with excited travelers unaware of the darkness surrounding my trip. Families laughed. Children ran with sun hats bouncing on their heads. Couples posed for photos. They were all heading toward 7 days of paradise. I was heading toward a trap. Yet I kept walking, dragging my suitcase behind me, one step at a time. I forced myself to focus. Emotion would not save me. Fear would not save me. Only preparation would. I boarded the ship with a polite smile, the kind expected from a man grateful for a generous gift. No one knew that my heart felt split open. No one knew that behind the calm expression was a mind already sharpening itself for survival. As I entered the stunning atrium of the ship, the marble floors, the polished railings, the vast glass elevators reflecting bursts of light, I inhaled deeply, grounding myself. Leonard thought I would die quietly, unnoticed, slipping over a railing into the sea. He thought the old man he had underestimated all his life would simply obey fate, would crumble like a leaf in the wind. But I would not. I gazed at the sea stretching beyond the windows, endless and glittering, and made myself another promise. I will come back alive. And when I do, Leonard will face everything he tried to escape. The ocean would not become my grave. It would become the place where I began to fight back. Stepping deeper into the ship felt like stepping into another world. Soft music drifted from hidden speakers. Guests laughed in clusters of bright clothing, and the scent of citrus and polished wood filled the air. If I were any other man, on any other trip, perhaps I would have allowed myself to marvel. But beauty meant nothing when danger hid behind it. I reminded myself that every hallway, every corner, every railing could be a stage for the accident Leonard planned. I headed to my cabin on the 9th deck. It was spacious, comfortably furnished, with a private balcony overlooking the endless sea. A perfect place to rest, and a perfect place to fall. I stepped onto the balcony only long enough to understand how easily a man could disappear from it. No cameras, no witnesses. The ocean waiting like an open mouth. I went back inside and closed the sliding door firmly. I needed a plan, and allies. I decided to explore the ship, partly to understand its layout, partly to occupy my mind before fear swallowed me whole. I wandered through the promenade lined with boutiques, a small theater rehearsing for evening shows, and a library tucked quietly between 2 lounges. People moved with carefree joy, unaware that a predator's blueprint was hidden within my itinerary. At lunchtime, hunger pushed me toward the main dining hall. The room was elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the sunlit ocean. I chose a seat near the window, hoping the open view might soothe me. As I settled in, I noticed a man seated alone at the table beside mine. Neatly combed silver hair, crisp linen shirt, posture straight yet relaxed. He looked up from his book and offered a polite, sincere smile, one of those smiles that held no calculation behind it. Beautiful day, he said. Yes, I replied softly. A beautiful day. He extended a hand. Adrian Mercer. Thomas Hale. We shook hands, and something about the quick, firm connection eased a knot inside my chest. Adrian had the kind of presence that suggested stability, the kind earned by men who had lived through storms and learned how to stay standing. We began with small talk, the way strangers on a ship often do. But he had a perceptiveness that unsettled me in a strangely comforting way. You seem troubled, he said gently. I don't say that to intrude. I say it because men our age don't always have someone to notice. For a moment I hesitated. How much should I reveal? But silence is dangerous too, and loneliness even more so. I'm just adjusting, I murmured. This is my first cruise. He nodded knowingly. Firsts can be overwhelming. But there's more weighing on you than that, isn't there? I exhaled slowly. Let's just say this trip wasn't entirely my idea. Adrian's eyes softened with understanding. If you ever need someone to talk to, or someone to simply sit with, I'm around. I'm in cabin 1243. Something inside me shifted. Perhaps fate had placed this man beside me. Or perhaps it was simple coincidence. Whatever it was, I felt a faint thread of trust forming. After lunch, I excused myself and headed to the library where rows of computers lined a silent corner. Internet access was slow and expensive, but I didn't need much time. I typed a brief, coded message to Daniel Cross, the private investigator I had contacted before boarding. Message sent. I spent the next hour wandering near the casino, observing without drawing attention. Lights flashed, coins clinked, and laughter roared from card tables. It was a place built on risk and desperation. A fitting reminder of what might have driven Leonard to the edge. As I turned to leave, I felt a prickling sensation at the back of my neck. Someone was watching me. Near the bar stood a man in a rust-colored shirt, leaning casually, yet his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that pierced through the noisy room. His stare didn't waver, not for a second. I walked away slowly, pretending not to notice. When I reached the elevators and glanced back, he had shifted positions, but his eyes remained on me. My pulse quickened. I made my way to the upper deck, pretending to admire the ocean. Moments later, I saw him again, leaning against a railing, pretending to check his watch. Too many coincidences. I whispered to myself, Leonard, what have you done? When evening fell, I met Adrian again near the lounge. His expression brightened when he saw me, but faded quickly as he read my face. You're not safe in your cabin, are you? He asked quietly. No, I admitted. And I think someone on this ship is watching me. Adrian was silent for a moment, then nodded with firm resolve. Then we handle this together, he said. Stay in my cabin tonight. We'll figure out the rest in the morning. And just like that, I no longer faced the storm alone. The next morning, Adrian and I woke with a shared understanding. We were no longer simply two travelers enjoying a voyage. We were men standing inside a labyrinth someone else had designed for my death. The ship glided gently across smooth water, but inside me a storm churned. We need facts, Adrian said, as he prepared coffee in the small kitchenette of his suite. Facts are what separate fear from strategy. He was right. Fear alone wouldn't save me. Facts would. After breakfast, we headed straight to the passenger services desk. The receptionist greeted us warmly, unaware that this moment could determine whether I lived or died. I forced a smile, leaning forward slightly. I just want to confirm some travel details, I said. My name is Thomas Hale. She typed quickly, her brows knitting as she scanned the screen. Mr. Hale, I see your cruise reservation. 7 days. Ocean View Cabin. But, she paused. Adrian stepped a little closer. But what? It appears you only have a one-way outbound ticket. There is no return flight attached. The words were gentle, polite, but they struck like a hammer. I steadied myself with the edge of the counter. There must be a mistake, I said, though I already knew the truth. My son handled everything. She scrolled further. The reservation was purchased solely as one way. I'm sure he planned to book your return later. My stomach twisted. Leonard had no intention of bringing me home alive. Adrian spoke calmly. Can he purchase a return ticket right now? Preferably something guaranteed? Of course, she replied, tapping rapidly. There's still availability for the day you disembark. Book it, I said immediately. Please. While she processed the payment, I felt Adrian's reassuring presence beside me. It mattered more than I expected. When she handed me the printed confirmation, I saw the truth clearly. Leonard had not simply overlooked my return. He had deliberately left the end of my journey blank. As we stepped away, Adrian whispered, That's the first proof. Document it. Photograph everything. I did. Every receipt. Every timestamp. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. Leonard. Adrian was beside me in an instant, holding up his phone with the recording app ready. I inhaled slowly and answered. Hey, Dad, Leonard said, his voice syrupy and bright. How's the cruise treating you? It's lovely, son. The cabin is very comfortable. I slept well. He paused, just a beat too long. Good. I wanted to check if everything was running smoothly. You're still in your room on deck 9, right? I glanced at Adrian. Leonard's tone sounded casual, but the question was sharp as a blade. Yes, I lied. Same room. Great, Dad. Try to get some fresh air on your balcony tonight. The sunset is supposed to be stunning. My blood turned cold. He was guiding me into position like a piece on a board. Adrian scribbled a note and slid it toward me. Keep playing dumb. I'll try, I said softly. I've been staying away from the railing, though, little dizzy from the sea. Leonard laughed lightly. Just don't overthink it. Enjoy yourself. That's the whole point. He hung up, but the mask he wore in that conversation became undeniable. Brianna called later that evening, her voice strangely cheerful. Thomas, just checking in. Leonard says you sounded so relaxed yesterday. Relaxed. The word felt like poison. I am, I replied. Though I found it odd, my ticket didn't include a return flight. A long silence. Then she forced a laugh. Oh, that must be a mix-up. I'll look into it. No need, I said. I purchased my own. Another silence. Tighter this time. Well, that works too. Just enjoy yourself, okay? She ended the call abruptly. The facade was cracking. But the most unsettling discovery came later that day. Adrian took me to the casino, insisting, We need to observe him. If he's following you, he'll reveal himself. So I played my part, acting slightly unsteady, squinting at the slot machine buttons, muttering about seasickness. It did not take long. The man in the rust-colored shirt appeared again. This time he sat beside me. You all right, sir? He asked gently. You seem a bit off balance. Too much champagne at breakfast, I chuckled, letting my voice wobble. My son booked this trip all by himself. Cabin 921. Balcony with a view big enough to scare me. The man's eyes gleamed, a flicker of intention too quick for an amateur to hide. Balconies can be dangerous at night, he said. Wind gets strong. Floors get slippery. Is that so? I slurred. He nodded. Be careful. No one wants an accident. He stood, walked briskly to the corner, and made a call. Adrian followed discreetly and returned minutes later, face pale. He confirmed your cabin number, Adrian whispered, and he said, he's nervous about the railing. Perfect. Perfect. I felt my heart harden. Leonard had planted a killer on this ship, but he had also underestimated the man he planned to bury at sea. That night, long after the corridors had quieted and the ship hummed softly against the waves, Adrian and I sat at the small table in his cabin, a single lamp casting warm light over the shadows of our faces. On the table lay a growing pile of evidence, screenshots, recordings, written notes, receipts, and my newly purchased return ticket. The pieces were forming a mosaic of betrayal, each sharper than the last. We need the captain, Adrian said at last. Not a security guard, not a supervisor. The captain. I nodded. If anyone can authorize the kind of surveillance we need, it's him. Captain Rowan Blake was in his early 50s, with a measured stride and steady eyes, exactly the kind of man who had survived storms, both literal and human. We met him in his office the next morning, a room lined with maps and monitors. He listened without interrupting as we laid out the entire story from the overheard call at my house to the man in the rust-colored shirt, to the evasive conversations with Leonard and Brianna. When we finished, the captain leaned back slowly. Mr. Hale, this is not the first time I've seen greed twist a family, but it may be the most calculated. Adrian added, we believe the man following Thomas intends to act during the captain's gala tomorrow night, when most passengers are distracted. And, I said, I'm certain Leonard expects me to return to my cabin after midnight. Captain Blake steepled his fingers. Then that is where we catch him. He explained his plan with a precision that steadied my trembling nerves. Additional cameras would be installed discreetly along the hallway leading to my cabin. 2 plainclothes security officers would be stationed nearby, blending in as passengers out for a late walk. A hidden camera would be placed inside my cabin itself, angled toward the balcony door. You will not go to your room under any circumstances, the captain said. You will spend the night in Mr. Mercer's cabin, and we will create the illusion that you returned as usual. Adrian smiled faintly. We're turning the hunter into the hunted. Before we left, Captain Blake pressed a small black object into my hand. A silent alert. Push this once and security will know you are in danger. Don't hesitate. I closed my fingers around it. Thank you, Captain. As we walked back through the ship, I felt the weight of the plan settle inside me. Not fear, but a cold readiness. For the first time since boarding, I felt a sense of ground beneath my feet. But that evening, as the ship glided deeper into open water, something happened that neither Adrian nor I could explain. We returned to his cabin to find a piece of folded paper on the floor just inside the door. It hadn't been there earlier. Adrian bent to pick it up, his brows tightening. What is it? I asked. He opened the note. For a moment he said nothing. Then he handed it to me. It read, Do not trust the man beside you. My heart lurched. What? What does that mean? Adrian stiffened. Someone must have slipped this under the door. But who? And why? His jaw tightened. Probably the same man who's been following you. He wants us divided. Isolate one, weaken the other. Or, I paused, is there someone else? Someone we haven't noticed? The ship rocked gently beneath our feet, but inside the cabin the air felt heavy, suddenly colder. Adrian placed a hand on my shoulder. Thomas, look at me. I looked up, and his eyes were steady, calm, unwavering, the same eyes that had offered me lunch on my first day aboard. I have stood by you from the moment you told me the truth. I have nothing to gain by harming you, nothing to inherit, no debts to pay. This note is designed to break our alliance. We won't let it. I breathed out slowly. You're right. You've risked your safety for me. I know your heart. Yet the note remained on the table like a silent question neither of us could fully dismiss. That night, as the ship prepared for the gala, we went over the plan again and again. What time I would appear, what time I would leave, exactly where I would walk, which door I would enter, where Adrian would be waiting. This only works, he said, if you act like nothing is wrong. Pretend to be a man walking willingly into danger, I murmured. No, Adrian corrected softly. Pretend to be the man your son thinks you are, then become the man he never saw coming. Despite the tension and the lingering suspicion from the mysterious note, we sealed our strategy with a quiet understanding. Tomorrow night, the one who had been hunted would finally strike back, and Leonard's plan would begin to crumble. The night of the gala arrived dressed in gold and champagne. Music spilled from the grand hall in warm waves, the kind that made even hesitant feet drift toward the dance floor. Guests shimmered beneath crystal lights, cameras flashed, and laughter filled the space as though joy were infinite. But beneath all the glamour, my heartbeat thudded like a quiet drum of war. Tonight was the night Leonard expected me to die. Adrian adjusted my collar before we stepped inside. Remember, he murmured, every move you make is part of the trap. Don't rush. Don't show nerves. I won't, I said, though my hands shook faintly until I folded them behind my back. The gala unfolded in elegant chaos. I forced myself to smile, to nod, to speak kindly to strangers. For decades, I had mastered the art of appearing calm even when my world cracked. Tonight, that skill became my shield. Adrian remained close, drifting in and out of my field of vision like a silent guardian. At 11:30 p.m., I excused myself from a couple discussing their anniversary. I moved toward the exit with deliberate slowness. The man in the rust-colored shirt stood near the bar, now disguised in a charcoal suit, but his eyes never left me. They followed like a shadow. I gave Adrian a quiet glance as we passed each other near the doorway. He nodded once, subtle and firm. The performance had begun. Outside the gala hall, the corridor stretched long and quiet. A faint hum of the ship echoed through the polished floors. I walked toward the elevators, counting the seconds. Heart steady, steps measured. Leonard had always underestimated me. Tonight, that weakness of his might be my salvation. I descended to deck 9, stepping into the softly lit hallway leading to my cabin. Cameras, installed just hours earlier, watched from discreet corners. Hidden officers stood behind cabin doors, pretending to be guests. Everything was in place. I turned right at the hallway's bend, then slipped into the emergency stairwell. Adrian was waiting one flight above, watching through a small viewing slit. "You did well," he whispered. "Now we wait." For 15 long minutes, nothing happened. My breath fogged lightly in the cool air. The ship continued its quiet glide across the dark ocean, unaware of the danger unfolding behind its walls. Then footsteps. Slow, cautious, heavy. Adrian leaned forward. "He's here." I pressed my back to the wall, gripping the panic device the captain had given me. Through the narrow slit, I saw him, the man from the casino, moving down the corridor, glancing left and right like a wolf checking for other predators. He reached my cabin door. From my vantage point, I watched him pull gloves over his hands. He produced a lock-picking tool and slipped it into the key slot. In less than 10 seconds, the door clicked open. He slipped inside. Adrian whispered, "Security, now." 3 silent officers descended on the hallway. One positioned himself at the cabin door, while the others approached from opposite ends. Their timing was perfect. Inside, the man examined the room as though checking a blueprint. He lifted a flashlight, sweeping it across the bed, the desk, the carpet. Then he moved to the balcony door. He unlocked it and stepped outside. Adrian tightened his jaw. That's it. He's testing how to stage it. A moment later, the officers surged into the cabin. The struggle lasted seconds. The man lunged toward the balcony railing as if attempting to leap over it. But 2 officers tackled him. A third pulled a small black vial from his pocket, a vial filled with a clear liquid that shimmered in the flashlight beam. "Sedative," Adrian muttered. "He planned to knock you unconscious first." My throat constricted. The man was cuffed and dragged into the hallway. He shouted, insisting he had the wrong cabin, insisting he'd gotten lost. But the security officers stayed calm. They had heard every lie before. Adrian and I followed them to the lower deck, where temporary holding rooms were located. Captain Blake arrived moments later, his expression hardened. "Search him," the captain ordered. They did. What they found froze the blood in my veins. Inside the man's jacket pocket was a burner phone. On it were messages. "He will be alone after midnight. Use the balcony. Make it look accidental. I'll confirm from my end." No, but then something else. A second message thread. New initials. Not from Leonard, and not from anyone I recognized. The captain scrolled slowly, then looked up with grave eyes. "Mr. Hale," he said, "it appears there is another accomplice on board, someone giving him instructions separately." My breath caught. "Another?" "Yes," he replied. "Someone who has been watching you and monitoring your movements closer than the first man." The room seemed to tilt. Leonard had not hired one hunter. He had hired 2. And one of them was still out there, in the dark, somewhere on this ship. The air in the security room felt dense, as though the ship itself was holding its breath. Captain Blake placed the burner phone on the table, its cracked screen still glowing faintly. Adrian and I stood beside him, watching as security downloaded every message, every timestamp, every call log. The second thread of instructions remained on the screen, brief, coded, and deeply unsettling. "Who is this second sender?" I asked, my voice tight. "We don't know yet," the captain replied. "But the instructions are detailed. The sender knew the layout of your cabin, the timing of the gala, even the surveillance blind spots before we installed the new cameras. A chill crept up my spine. That means they've been watching me closely. Adrian stiffened beside me. Too closely. Captain Blake turned to one of his officers. Pull the passenger list. Cross-reference all recent ID verifications and security logs. This second accomplice won't hide for long. But the ship was large. Too large. Thousands of guests. Miles of corridors. Countless shadows where a predator could linger. Minutes turned into an hour as officers combed through data. During that time, the man we captured remained locked in a reinforced holding cell, his eyes darting like a trapped animal. He refused to speak. Every question was met with silence or a smirk, as though he believed he was still winning. Finally, an officer rushed back into the room. "Captain, you should see this." He handed Blake a tablet. On it was a photo taken from a lower-deck lounge camera, grainy but unmistakable. A woman sat in the corner wearing a wide sun hat and oversized sunglasses, her posture tense as she tapped furiously on her phone. Adrian leaned closer. "Is that—" I felt my stomach drop. "Brianna, Leonard's wife. On the ship, under a false name." My mouth went dry. "She boarded with a forged reservation?" The captain nodded grimly. "We've seen it before. People use unused or canceled slots to slip aboard. But she made a mistake. She used Wi-Fi under a hidden device name, and it matched a device previously flagged at your home address." Adrian exhaled sharply. "She came to confirm your death personally." A sickening wave washed over me. "All this time, she was here?" "She's been moving through the ship's quiet areas," the officer continued. "Gym hallway, observation deck, staff staircase. She knew where cameras were weakest." My hands tightened into fists. Brianna had always watched me with thinly veiled contempt, but I never imagined she possessed this level of cold calculation. Captain Blake straightened, his voice firm. "We're bringing her in now." A team of officers swept toward the lower decks while Adrian and I waited among the hum of monitors. Minutes crawled by. The ship moved smoothly, but the tension inside me tossed like a storm. Then the door opened. 2 officers walked in, flanking a woman whose disguise had slipped, hat removed, sunglasses trembling in her hand. Brianna looked startled but not defeated. Those eyes I remembered, sharp, hungry, stared directly at me with something cruel beneath them. They sat her down. Captain Blake folded his arms. "Brianna Hale," he began, "you are being detained for attempted murder conspiracy aboard this vessel. You will remain in custody until authorities take over in port." She sneered. "You can't prove anything." Adrian stepped forward. "Actually, we can." The captain turned the burner phone toward her. The messages glowed like daggers. She looked at them, and her composure cracked. A small, involuntary flinch, then denial. "That isn't mine." Captain Blake nodded to his officer, who placed a second phone beside the burner. "This one was found in your bag." Her eyes widened. Identical messages. Identical timing. Identical instructions. Cornered. Finally, she exhaled, shoulders sagging, not in remorse but in resentment. "It wasn't just Leonard," she muttered. "He was drowning. We both were. Debts everywhere. Do you know what it's like to see your life collapsing? Your credit destroyed? Your home slipping away?" I stared at her, stunned by the coldness. "So your solution was to kill me?" She scoffed. You were the easiest way out. He said you had life insurance, savings, a house. You were going to leave it all to him anyway. My voice shook, not with fear, but heartbreak. I loved you both. I would have helped, without conditions. She looked at me with something almost like pity, but more like disdain. Love doesn't pay debts. Adrian stepped forward, fury sharpening his features. And murder does? She had no answer. Captain Blake ended the interrogation with a curt order. Take her. As they escorted her away, she looked over her shoulder at me, her eyes colder than the dark sea outside. In that moment, I realized something painful and undeniable. Leonard hadn't become a monster alone. He had married one, and together they had built the plan meant to end my life. The following morning, the ship glided into port under a pale sunrise, its reflection trembling across the quiet water. Most passengers bustled with excitement, eager to step back onto land after a week of indulgence. But for me, stepping off that ship felt like walking out of a battlefield I had never chosen, yet one I had survived with every ounce of strength I possessed. Captain Blake met me near the gangway, his uniform crisp, his eyes steady. Mr. Hale, he said, authorities are waiting on the dock. Both suspects will be transferred directly into custody. You will not have to see them. I nodded, feeling something heavy loosen in my chest. Thank you, Captain, for everything. He offered a quiet smile. You saved yourself, Mr. Hale. We only gave you the tools. Adrian stood beside me, hands in his pockets, expression soft with pride. You did more than survive, he said. You fought back. I gripped his shoulder. I couldn't have done it alone. We walked down the ramp together, the cool morning air brushing against our faces. Police vehicles waited at the pier, their lights muted but unmistakable. Officers carefully escorted the hired attacker first, then Brianna, still defiant, her lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. She refused to look at me. For a moment, I almost wished she had. I wanted her to see the man she and Leonard had tried to erase from the world, a man they had failed to destroy. Then she was placed into the van, the door slammed shut, and the vehicle sped away. A few hours later, I boarded a flight home. The quiet hum of the airplane settled something inside me. For the first time since the nightmare began, I let myself breathe without fear. Waiting for me at the airport was Private Investigator Daniel Cross, a tall man with sharp eyes made for seeing lies others missed. We shook hands firmly. I'm glad you're back safely, Mr. Hale, he said. I've collected everything we need. Your son and his wife left quite a trail. He briefed me as we walked toward the exit. Fraudulent loans, forged signatures, gambling networks Leonard had borrowed from, a hidden credit line Brianna had opened in my name. The web was far worse than I imagined, an entire life of secrets piled behind my back. By sunset, Daniel and I sat inside a quiet police precinct, handing over the mountain of evidence. Officers moved with swift precision, scanning documents, copying recordings, reviewing financial records. The chief called us into his office. Mr. Hale, he said, with what you've brought us, issuing arrest warrants is immediate. Your son is in serious legal jeopardy. My heart tightened. Despite everything, a part of me still trembled at hearing the words, your son, paired with arrest. But justice demanded truth, not sentiment. That night, Leonard was arrested at his house. According to officers, he answered the door looking tired, stressed, maybe even defeated. Perhaps he had sensed the shift, the unraveling of his perfect plan. When they placed cuffs on him, he asked only one question: "Is my father alive?" When I heard that, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the months that followed, the case surged through the courts. I sat through hearings, depositions, and cross-examinations. Leonard avoided looking at me at first, his eyes buried in shame. But during the trial itself, he finally glanced up. His face held a mixture I recognized instantly: disbelief, guilt, and the silent mourning of a man who realized too late that he had underestimated his own father. The jury took only 4 hours. Leonard was sentenced to 18 years. Brianna received 8. As the gavel fell, I felt no triumph, only a weight lifting from my shoulders, a heavy grief dissolving into something gentler. Freedom, perhaps, or peace. After the trial, I made choices I never thought I'd have the courage to make. I sold the house filled with ghosts of the past. I moved into a quiet apartment with warm light and tall windows. I began volunteering at a community center supporting older victims of family betrayal, men and women who had been silenced, manipulated, or dismissed. Every time I shared my story, I watched something change in their eyes. Strength awakened. Shame melted. Hope returned. Adrian and I stayed close. He visited often, and together we spoke about life, aging, resilience. Sometimes we shared silence, the comfortable kind found only between two people who have survived something profound. And through it all, one truth crystallized inside me: betrayal does not define you. What defines you is the moment you choose to rise. I had gone on a cruise meant to be my final journey. Instead, it became the beginning of my rebirth. And for the rest of my days, I carried this lesson gently but firmly in my heart. A man is never too old to save his own life, and never too old to start living it again.